Welcome to the Fight with Teddy Atlas. I'm Ken Rideout, joined as always by the great Teddy Atlas, coming to you with another quarantine edition of The Fight. Teddy, I wanted to talk to you today about the five greatest heavyweights of all time, a topic that's constantly debated, but one that I've received a ton of questions for on social media. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to you and hear your opinion on the five greatest heavyweights of all time.
Well, there's going to be plenty of debating this. Should be fun, I hope. Hope it doesn't become ugly. You know, people take these opinions very seriously. I hope that they don't get too, crazy about it, but it's a subjective thing. And when you have subjective things that are subjective by nature, you have all kinds of opinions all over the lot. And, of course, it is only my opinion. Based on, I want to believe and do believe, enough knowledge to have an opinion, which is a second thing that makes it more difficult for such thing. One is the subjectiveness of it, but the other is, with a subject like this, a sport that goes back so far, back to the 1800s and before, depending on where you trace the origins of it. I mean, there's not a lot of people that have information and knowledge about the fighters of that era. I mean, it goes back further than baseball does with the history of it. So, I've never seen a guy 200 years old. I mean, have you? I haven't met one yet. So, being that we are devoid of guys 200 years old, I think, for the most part, until we find one, it adds to the difficulty and to the arguments that will ensue after my list comes out. Because, again, there's just a lot of people that don't have the ability to have the information, through stories, through film, through whatever's availability it is, don't have the information of the fighters from those eras. So they can't include them. They can't appreciate them the way that they deserve to be appreciated. That's the one thing that bothers me about it. I'm envious about the sport, about baseball. Because baseball, basketball, football, of course, they don't have the history. Baseball does. It's got a long history. But there's so much more known, so many more people that put out the information so people can know some of those old players. And there should be even more known about Jackie Robinson and players even before. There should be even more known about them. But at least there are places where you can get that information, outlets that make that information more available. Boxing doesn't have it. Boxing really doesn't have those outlets. Those mechanisms. We've got a few historians, good ones here and there, guys that know and appreciate the old timers like Russell Peltz and Michael Silva and, a few other guys, Goldman, and there's a few historians out there that appreciate it, but on the whole, there's not enough that's there for the young fans to know about these great fighters. These extraordinary people, and that's too bad. Maybe this helps a little bit talking about having shows like this every once in a while to make people aware of some of these fighters that they weren't aware of. So, having said that, I take it serious. I take it like a responsibility. Like I'm hopefully making somebody aware, teaching, making someone aware of something. And why they should be aware of something. They don't have to agree with me, but at least hear the reasons of why these fighters, to me, are great. Not only the guys in the era that you're familiar with, but in an era, again, that you may not be familiar with. And listen, it's not about size. That old saying, Ken? It's not about the size of the man in the fight. It's about the size of the fight in the man. That's what boxing's about, too. It's not about, of course, the earlier years, the earlier generation, the earlier eras, the men were smaller. Athletes have gotten bigger. The NFL players at the beginning of the NFL's history were smaller. I mean, incredibly smaller. Now they're much, much bigger. But still the talents, the skill levels that made them special still can be properly understood, explored, properly appreciated, compared. It's not the size, it's the talent, the mentality, the experience they had, the ability to use that experience. So I'm going to go with number one. I'm going to start right out of the chute. Greatest heavyweight of all time. Of all time! Not the guy who used to say that. Not the guy that I might have misled you to thinking by just saying that. It's going to be Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, and his great trainer, Jack Blackburn. They were a great partnership. He was a great fighter, too. He didn't get his credit for it because he was around at a time when this country didn't treat black men, people properly.
Yeah.
But Blackburn was a special guy. He was a black fighter that fought everybody. He didn't get a chance to fight a lot of fighters because he was black. Didn't get a chance to fight a lot of white fighters that were up there. But he took his, after he retired as a fighter, he took his skills, and what a trainer. What a special guy. He had as much, if not more, to do with the success of Joe Louis than probably most trainers in this business. Some of them have more impact and effect on their pupil, on their protege, than others. Blackburn had a lot of impact on Joe Louis. He taught him to always be balanced. He was one of the most balanced fighters I ever saw, Ken. Always in position with his footwork. It wasn't an accident. Never out of position. And he was a great puncher with either hand. And he didn't waste anything. There was no space in between his punches. They were short, concise, explosive. And he was the greatest finisher maybe of all time in the heavyweight division. Not maybe, he was. He got you hurt. He got rid of you. He got you out of there. You didn't get a second chance. His punches were in combination. They were short, body, head, powerful. He was calm, his demeanor, real calm all the time. Boy, oh boy. He corrected the mistakes along the way with Blackburn when he needed to. He lost to Schmeling on his way up, and he got knocked out. And then, after he won the title, he fought a rematch with Schmeling probably a couple years later, and he corrected the mistake. Schmeling had noticed that he was vulnerable to right hands, that sometimes Louis laid his head on the right side after he jabbed in the path to the right hand, and you could count him with the right hand. Schmeling was a great fighter, and he was a real good puncher, accurate puncher, and he took advantage of that. The great famous saying from that fight, Ken, before the fight, where Schmeling, a German fighter, said, I see something, which I think I can obviously exploit. And he did see something. He saw what I just described, an opportunity to land a right hand against the undefeated Louis. And like I said, Louis corrected that. Blackburn corrected that. And after he won the title, he fought the rematch. And boy, oh boy, did he make up for that loss with the whole world watching. You talk about pressure. That's why Louis is the greatest. You talk about pressure. You talk about pressure. We talking about pressure here?
That to me is one of the best stories of a heavyweight fight. Just during World War II, U.S. against Germany, a black guy against a white guy. It was like you couldn't draw more divisive lines at those times.
World War II, on the verge of World War II, with Hitler, a madman, trying to create a master race, take over the world. And You got Joe Louis fighting somebody who's Lewis has, who has Hitler has propped up as, the image of the Nazi regime, the superior race, all that crap. And, I mean, the whole world's watching. The whole freaking world's watching. The President of the United States, I think it was Roosevelt, calls up Lewis and says, you got a witness for the good guys. I mean, you talk about pressure. And it's in Yankee Stadium outdoors. Oh, and the world's watching. Oh, my goodness. Where is there more pressure? And what is Lewis? How does he respond to it? He destroys him. He annihilates him. He knocks him out in one round. One brutal round. One round of torrential rain, of brutal force and determination and focus to the body, to the head. Oh, wow. Yeah, Joe Louis, he earned the right from me to call him the greatest heavyweight of all time. Number 2, Muhammad Ali. Pioneer. There were pioneers before him. He copied from them, but great ones do that. They copy and they make it their own. They'll change it a little bit, tweak it a little bit. He copied from different people where a little bit of charisma, showmanship, and flash and ideas. He grabbed some ideas from the great Jersey Joe Walcott, who used to pick up his trunks a little bit, adjust his trunks, walk a little bit to the side, walk to the other side. Ali took it to another place. He took it to where he made it to shuffle, the Ali shuffle. But he got the ideas from great people like Jersey Joe Walcott, who was, as I said, in his own right, a great fighter. And he even said he got ideas from wrestlers, Gorgeous George, one of the wrestlers back in the day, with his antics and his stuff and, his shenanigans, where Ali understood, yeah, it's a sport, but it's a business. It's an entertainment business. I want to entertain. I want to make money. I want to put fannies in the seats. So, but with all of that, he had his own ideas. He took them to another place. He took all those ideas, he made them different. He made them better. There was a guy named James Corbett, Gentleman Jim Corbett, back in the beginning of the 19th century, who was a heavyweight champ, one of the first guys to use his legs to move around. But it was limited back in those days of how good he could be at it. Ali took it to a whole new level, to a whole new place, to a different stratosphere. And uses like never before was there a heavyweight. And not to mention Ali was also a gold medalist for the Olympics, representing the United States. But never before was there a heavyweight who moved as quickly, like a lightweight, quicker than a lightweight, used his legs, used the ring, and had scintillating, extraordinary speed with his hands, his feet. I mean, just move all night long would move. Customato used to say, listen, before his forced retirement, suspension from the ring for 3.5 years because of his refusal to go into the army during the Vietnam War. Before that, the only time you touched Ali was when the referee made you touch gloves before the beginning of the fight. And
yeah.
I mean, and that's another part of his greatness. I mean, this was a guy that did things no other heavyweight ever did. He moved, he threw combinations and speed faster than lightweights, featherweights. Didn't throw punches like this. And he broke all the rules, the conventional rules, the textbook on boxing, do's and don'ts. He pulled back. You're not supposed to pull back from punches. You're not supposed to drop your hands. He did all that. He made wrong right. How many guys are great enough to make wrong right? He was. I mean, wow. And then what he did outside the ring transcended what he did inside the ring. How strong he was, how powerful he was outside the ring, what he stood for, the fights outside the ring. So the social, challenges that he brought about and change that he brought about. All those things. And then one other. After his suspension for 3.5 years, he comes back and reinvents himself. Becomes a whole different Ali. A whole different version of himself. It's one thing to be great in one part of your life. To be great in two parts of your life. He came back, his skill won for him the first part of his life, his career. And then he came back and that skill was eroded. It was diminished. It was. He was never the same athlete. Never the same fighter. He reinvented himself, and now instead of winning with skill, he won with will. He won with will. We didn't know if he had that kind of will, really, because he had so much skill. He's like the typical version of the golden boy, that's so pretty and so good. You don't know if they earned the right to get your respect because they're so gifted. Like, you just think they're lucky. They just have that gift. And you don't know if they have what it takes underneath that you want them to have. That grit, that toughness, that determination, that will. Well, when you found out Ali had it, he had that too. It's kind of like Sugar Ray Leonard when he was the golden boy, the Olympics gold medalist and everything, welterweight, of course. And, undefeated. And people didn't appreciate him enough, some people. They didn't really appreciate it because he was so skilled, he was so pretty, it was so natural to him, that you figured, gee, but, he doesn't earn the right for us to give him that kind of adulation. He hasn't earned the right. We don't know if he's tough, if he's a fighter. We don't know. Well, you found out in the Duran fight. He lost that fight, but he won. But he won the adulation and respect of fans that he didn't have before that. And Ali did that.
Isn't it funny how fans will look at a guy like a Sugar Ray Leonard, Oscar De La Hoya, and they'll say, that guy, he's so handsome and so polished outside of the ring and seems to live a charmed life that they just assume, yeah, but he's not going to be able to be as tough as, pick someone who's like a Mickey Ward. He's not.
And they resent him. They resent him because...
Yeah, exactly. But it's just funny that people will make that assumption because they're handsome.
Yeah, they resent him because he's handsome. They resent him because he's so talented. He's so good. They resent him.
Yep.
And sometimes you got to earn that respect, and
exactly
in a different way, in a way that you shouldn't have to. But it's the law of the world sometimes, the law of the jungle, and the world can be a jungle, and sure enough, what happens? Like I said, Leonard he finally earned the love of the people, the respect of the people, losing to Duran. Ali finally earned it losing to Frazier the first time. That they saw him more than just a skilled guy, than a golden boy, than a privileged guy, that was given too much talent. They saw him as more than that. He earned their respect because he got in there and he behaved the way he behaved, like a fighter.
I think of that that description when I think of a guy like Ryan Garcia, who's incredibly handsome, has a bunch of tons of social media followers, and people discount him almost because he's handsome. I mean, he hasn't been in a lot of wars. He's a young guy, but I think of him like that, and I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people with his toughness, because I think from what I've seen, he's tougher than a lot of people give him credit for. But it'll be interesting to see how he develops anyway.
No, I agree. Real quick on that. Not only tougher than people might think, but smarter, more instinctual, more committed, more of a fighter. I think he's a fighter. Forget about all the other stuff. Forget all that. It matters to make money and everything. It matters. But what really matters the most, are you a fighter? He's a fighter. Very similar to the guy, ironically, that promotes him, De La Hoya.
Yep.
De La Hoya, hate him, love him, whatever. He's a little screwed up. He's got some problems. We all do. But one thing, he was a pretty damn good fighter, and gold medalist, world champion in several weight classes. And you know what? He was the golden boy. He was a matinee idol. He was a crossover where there weren't many, where the girls came to watch him fight. He was like Elvis Presley. He was like Sinatra. I mean, girls came to watch him fight, and girls are going to come watch Ryan Garcia fight.
Oh, they already come.
And they already are. And
he sold out that Honda Center against the I put it this way, I can't even remember who he fought, but it wasn't a big name. And to your point about Oscar, I was at the Fantasy Springs fight when Andrew Cancio lost to Rene Alvarado, and Oscar had his own security people to keep. I am not kidding you. There was a line of 20 to 50 women of all ages in a line down the middle of the aisle, standing there, and Oscar was leaning against the metal railings, the barrier, and women, young, old, standing in line to get a selfie with Oscar De La Hoya. It was, I've never, at all the fights I've been to, I've never seen anything like it.
He was a matinee idol. He was a different guy, in boxing. We don't get that much. And I think the funny thing, the connection here is that the guy who promotes, I said it already, that promotes, De La Hoya, that promotes Garcia. I think Garcia is in line to be very similar.
Yes.
Not as far as a person. He's his own person. But very similar in a lot of the ways that their careers went. And also similar in the way when you could be good looking, you could be all that, you could be marketed, but you better be able to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, you better be able to fight. And at the end of the day, with all the same similarities that this kid, Ryan Garcia, has, he knows how to fight. That's the key.
Yep.
It's kind of like that old story, that old fight fan story, that great old story where there's a club show going on and the priest is there, the neighborhood priest. He's always at the fights. Tough priest, he's there trying to help the neighborhood. And he's there watching the fights. And a guy gets in, it's a, Friday night fights. Guy gets in the ring, he goes over to a corner, he kneels down, he looks up to the skies, and he crosses himself, and then he gets up and he goes to his corner, and one of the fight fans turns to the priest and says, "Father, does that really help?" And the priest looks at him, this is a fight guy, this is a guy, grizzled, real fight guy, besides being a priest. He looks at him and says, "Only if you can fight, son."
That's a good one.
Garcia can fight.
Hell yeah, he can. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I don't know where we left off with Ali, but for all those reasons, a lot of people have him number one. I get it, but the guy was a pioneer. The guy, did things his own way, like Sinatra, and that song, "I Did It My Way." He did it his way, and he paid a price for it too. Paid a price for it, but he was willing to pay a price. He was damaged to the back end of his life with Parkinson's. There's no hiding it. Nobody loves and tries to protect this sport more than me. But you got to be honest too. When it was connected to the punches he took in the second half of his career, when he no longer had the ability to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, where all he had left was, in some ways, was his character, but it was great character, and it allowed him to make great history and win great fights, even when he wasn't the same athlete anymore. He was special. He was special for all those reasons. Number 3, baby. When I opened up about, talking about the days where a lot of people don't have information. They don't, our kids today, even in baseball, they should know who Jackie Robinson is. They don't. It's too bad. But at least there's more sources to know in baseball, more outlets, more programs, more places to go, more footage. Boxing, no, not nearly enough. Anyway, number 3, Jack Johnson, the great Jack Johnson. I know it's tough going back to those eras. People say, "Oh, they were prehistoric. They weren't as sophisticated. They weren't as advanced." They were, hey. They were ahead of their time. These special guys. Jack Johnson was a pioneer too, ahead of his time. First black heavyweight champ of all time, and a guy who implemented things that had not been done. He took foot movement. A guy's done it before him, but he took that and offense and defense. He merged them all together at a level that nobody had up to him. Nobody! There were great ones that did different things, but he did it at a better level. He had that kind of ability, that kind of talent and mind, where he mixed offense and defense. He put combinations together. He had footwork. And he handled pressure. Got to get credit for that. I gave Joe Louis credit, handling the toughest stage of any athlete ever in the history of athletics. Fighting a fight against a guy who had knocked him out 2 years earlier on the verge of World War II, when the whole world was watching, when the president was begging Joe Louis, you can't lose to this German.
It's unbelievable.
And Joe Louis had the capacity, the character to handle that pressure. Jack Johnson had it. That's special. That's a trait. That's a gift. That's a talent. That's an ability. Just as much as a left hook. They can knock you crooked. What pressure? He handled the pressure of being a black man. When people did not want a black man to be heavyweight champ of the world. It was the biggest position in sports in the country. Nobody was bigger than a heavyweight champ back in those days. And he was threatened. He was vilified. He was, like I said, his life was threatened. He was put in jail. They created a law called the Mann Act just to arrest him, transporting white women across state lines. How terrible is that? How absurd is that? And he lived through all that, and he handled all that, and was heavyweight champ of the world with all that, handling all that. Can you imagine? You're not just talking about lefts and rights coming at you. You're talking about a lot more than that coming at you. People complain today about the pressures. Please learn something about these great people. Please take a step back before you complain. Please educate yourself. But Jack Johnson, number 3. Number 4, The Rock. The Manessa Mala, Rocky Marciano, the only undefeated heavyweight champ, 49-0. Larry Holmes came close to tying it, but Michael Spinks got in the way. Again, smaller heavyweight, 182 pounds, whatever. So what? We make allowances for the errors. That doesn't matter. We go by what they did during their era. How they did it, who they did it with. He's undefeated heavyweight champ, Ken. Right? Yet. The only one we've ever had. Yet. He's underrated. How's that possible? But he's underrated. How's that possible? Really. Except in the old Italian, houses. He's not underrated there. But for the most part, he's underrated. And they said he didn't fight nobody. He fought fighters when they were too old. Let me tell you something. He beat 2 of the greatest fighters of all time. Ezra Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott. Yeah, they were older, but they were good when they were old. Some guys, that's their prime. Some guys that's when they were good. That's when they were good, when they were older. Archie Moore, yeah, he didn't get a chance. He didn't get treated right. Light heavyweight. He didn't get treated right either, black man. But He was 300 fights, 140 knockouts, 35, whatever, 135, whatever it was, most knockouts in the history of the sport. But a light heavyweight champ, he had to wait until late in his 30s to get a shot at the light heavyweight title. Then he kept it for a long time. But there's a guy, but he was good at that age. He was good, Archie Moore, at that age. Well, Jersey Joe Walcott and Ezra Charles, they were really good at that age. And Marciano beat him. And Marciano was losing in a 15-round fight. He was losing when he fought for the title against the great Jersey Joe Walcott. Losing. Jersey Joe Walcott, one of the great punchers of all time, too. Everyone's always talking about they only throw the names up like greatest punchers. Tyson, okay. Foreman, yes. Wilder, yes. Joe Louis, yes. Ernie Shavers, yes. But they don't mention Jersey Joe Walcott. Great puncher. Great fighter. And Marciano's behind going into the 13th round. He can't win except by knockout. He could punch. He was a great puncher. Great chin. Great condition. Great determination. Like all the great ones have to have. But he had a trick up his sleeve. He had a mechanism, a device, like Cuss used to tell me, where when it got to those desperate times, he could call on it and find a way. Find a way to win. Find a way to land that punch. What good is that power if you don't know how to land it? What good is it if you can't land it against a good fighter? He found a way in the 13th round. He didn't just land a lucky punch. Susie Q, the right hand they used to call the Susie Q. But he found a way. He started the left hand, He started the left hand. Got the eyes of Walcott, the great Walcott, to look that way. Just to distract him, just to pull his eyes into the wrong place. Got his head. Bang! That picture's up on the bar, up in the, up on many pubs, many bars across the country. You go into, you see that picture of that right hand landing on Jersey Joe Walcott. And if you look close, you see all you need to see. You don't see this, but you see the right hand landing, but you see Walcott just started to throw the left hook. Because he thought, because of what he saw, that he was the one who was going to time Marciano. He didn't know that he got set up. That's beautiful. That's poetry. That's listening. For me, that's Louis Armstrong playing the trumpet. It really is. It's beautiful. And so Marciano, yeah, I know that he fought some soft guys on the way up. He might have fought his brother.
I mean, fighting a soft guy on the way up is like a theme of all fighters these days.
Fighting a brother could be rough.
Yeah, no kidding.
That could be tough, too. That could be real tough. You know about that. So, listen, everyone's got those soft touches on their record coming up. Everyone. But where do you get to and what do you become during the course of your career? And who do you wind up beating when you have to beat the good ones, the great ones? And he beat two of the greatest. So, Rocky Marciano, number 4, baby. All right, you ready for number 5?
Yep.
Okay, this ain't going to be on a lot of people's list. It's on my list. That's all I care about. That's all you care about too, right, Ken?
That's right.
Thank you. Gene Tunney. Gene Tunney. I'm not sure the exact record. Robert get it because they had newspaper decisions sometimes back then. But I'm gonna say it was 84-1. I'm gonna say it was something like 84-1 in some draws. What did you say, Rob?
65-1-1.
Yeah, 65-1-1. That's not bad. But he had more wins than that. I guarantee you. He had some that are not posted, that are not recorded. They used to have what they call newspaper decisions where in some places in the country boxing was not legal. So they would fight without a decision, and the next day the newspaper would decide, the writers would decide who the winner was. But I believe he was, on one accounting, something like 84-1 and maybe 4 draws. But whatever it was, damn good record, great fighter, also a pioneer of sorts. He used his legs. We had guys, like I said, gentleman Jim Corbett, of course, used his legs. And then you had the great Jack Johnson, who used them not to move like Ali, but just to do little steps here and there and change distance in a different way, but in a great way. Tunney used his legs, and he's an ex-Marine. He was a different cat. He was a heavyweight champ. You're supposed to have that nose like this, like mine a little bit, and all that. And he was different. You're supposed to be a guy that came from the school of hard knocks. Yeah, all that. And maybe you couldn't put together enough words, which is insulting because these guys were smart. These guys in their own right were intelligent and geniuses in many accounts to be champions. They were. They really were.
Yeah.
But this is a guy who read books during camp. People were like, what? What? Heavyweight champ reading books? Come on. And I'm talking about books like without a lot of pictures in them. You know what I mean?
War and Peace.
Yeah, like thick. I mean, really. I mean, like, tough. So this is a guy that had a record, lost one fight, 80-1, whatever it was, fought during an era when everyone fought, when there was so many great fighters, and everybody was fighting everybody. And his only loss to one of the greatest fighters of all time, Ken, the great Harry Greb, who had about 300 fights, middleweight champ. Because Tunney was only a middleweight, and then he moved up to heavyweight, about 180-some pounds back in those days. Same thing, as I said earlier. And here is, here's a guy in Tunney that his only loss is to the great Harry Greb. Unbelievable. The Pittsburgh Windmill. I mean...
And it was a decision, too, so it could have been subjective.
And then he beat him twice after that. And had a draw with him, I believe. So, I mean, it was a lesson for him because Greb was so tough. Greb beat him the first time, but he corrected what he had to correct. He got tougher mentally. He did everything that Wilder's going to have to do if he's going to beat Fury, okay? Well, there it is for you. And he faced what he had to face. Looked himself in the mirror and said, I won't be out tough the next time. I won't be out punched the next time. I will take control of this in my environment. And I will be tough enough to do that the smart way. That's tough. That's real toughness. And he again, Tunney, ex-Marine, read books in camp, was involved in the first $1 Million Gate with Jack Dempsey, the great Jack Dempsey, who a lot of people are going to say, how do you not have him on your list? They're going to get mad at me. But if we went to 6, he would have been right there, number 6. You can't put them all there, but he would have been number 6. He was great. But Tunney beat him. Tunney beat you. To be on this list, you got to have beaten a great fighter, I think. He beat the great Jack Dempsey. He beat the great Harry Greb. He beat Dempsey twice. And the first $1 Million fight was one of those fights. And he won a controversial fight called the Long Count, where the Marquess of Queensberry rules were first inserted, in this fight. And with Dempsey. And where, I think it was in the rematch, obviously. Rob, verify that for me, that the Marcus of Queen, the Long Count fight was the second fight with Dempsey. And anyway, before the Marcus of Queensberry rules, my friends across the pond, thank you guys. Before that, you could stand over your opponent when you knocked him down, Ken. And when he got a knee off the ground, bang, you hit him again. Yeah. Yeah, it was
old school. Those are sounds like early days of UFC.
Yeah, very much. That's where UFC learned it. That's where they got the ideas. Dana White's older than you think. He's older. He looks good for for 220. So I was right. It was the second fight. It was the rematch. So in the rematch, he had beaten him the first time decision. Now, a year later, Tunney fights the great Jack Dempsey, the great puncher, the great finisher, the Manasseh Mauler. And I just realized that, who did I call?
You called Marciano that, but you were on such a roll, I was just
I'm sorry. That's Jack Dempsey. I'm sorry. Yeah, the Brockton Buster. The Brockton, what was, Marciano, let's correct it now. I'm glad I caught it. I'm glad I was thinking about it, or I just realized it. The Brockton Blockbuster was Marciano from Brockton, Massachusetts.
Just outside of Boston.
Up in your neighborhood.
Titletown.
Yeah. That was him. He was not the Manasseh Mauler. Jack Dempsey was the Manasseh Mauler, the great Jack Dempsey. So anyway, he fights Dempsey in a rematch, and the new rules are in place. Monkers of Queensberry. Now you knock a guy down, the rules that still stand all the way later today. You have to go to a neutral corner where the referee gives an 8 count, and then you come back out and continue fighting. So what happens? The great Jack Dempsey shows his greatness in the rematch. He catches him with that great left hook, short one, and he drops Tunney. And Tunney goes down. And instead of going right to a neutral corner, he stands over him. Probably for 2, 3, 4 seconds possibly. Maybe. And he stands over him, and it takes a little time for the referee now to force him to a neutral corner because Dempsey doesn't realize the new rules. He's used to fighting under the old rules. So by the time they get him to a neutral corner, a few seconds have transpired. Tunney's got a little more time to recover, and the count picks up. So the argument is, would Tunney have been able to get up if the count had been what it should have been, if Dempsey had gone to the neutral corner and the referee started counting right away? Would he have beaten the count?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of controversy. They called it the long count. I watched it. I think he would have beat the count because that's why Tunney's on my list, because he found a way. The great ones find a way, Ken.
Yep.
They find a way, like you. They find a way.
I'm trying.
They find a way. And listen, like I said, if it wasn't number 6, for those people that have their shotguns out ready to, shoot me dead because I don't have Jack Dempsey on there, we do this show behind plexiglass. You can't see it, but it's thick. It's about this thick, so they can't get to me, But and if I had a number 7, I'll blow people away. And that'll be it. I'll blow people away. I'm sure most people have never heard of this guy, and that's why I'm going to mention him. Jim Jeffries. Jim Jeffries, he's not understood enough to get the credit that he deserved because, again, back in that era, he's really underrated very much. And his only loss, he had one loss, and he was like 20-1, somewhere 19-1, 20, I don't know, whatever it was. But his only loss was to a guy who's on this list, to the great, great Jack Johnson. And the way he fought Jack Johnson, again, is kind of unfortunate maybe for Jeffries, because he was off for 5 years, and then they brought him out of retirement because they didn't want Johnson, a black man, to be heavyweight champ. So they brought the great Jim Jeffries 5 years out of retirement. 6 years. Even worse. 6 years. They bring him out of retirement to fight the great Jack Johnson. And Johnson stops him in how many rounds? What round?
Stopped him in the... 1 second.
This is extraordinary, too. Back in those days. And this is a guy coming back, like I said, that many years later.
This can't be right. 45 rounds?
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
45 rounds.
There you go. You got it.
I
It
would
was a
be
different sport back there, different men. Okay?
45 rounds.
That's why I'm bringing to light these men that the people today don't know. They don't know. They should know, but they don't. Maybe now enough people hear this program and watch this, they will know. But yeah.
Jeffries was 19-0-2 going into that fight with 16 knockouts, and Jack Johnson was 50 wins, 5 losses, 9 draws.
Yeah, I mean, so I put Jeffries because of that. A little bit of an education for some people that don't know about some of these great men, these great fighters. Maybe you know a little more. You do know a little more, I hope. And maybe you search out a little more now, too. But, yeah, his only loss was to, as I said, the great Jack Johnson, who I have number 3 of all time.
It may have been 15 rounds, but a scheduled 45 rounder. It says heavy contest 45 rounds, and then it says Johnson won TKO round 15. So either he won in 15 or 45, but even that they have 45 listed sounds crazy.
Yeah, well,
But
it was
way.
then maybe that's what it was. But I mean,
Yeah.
many of the fights went 40 rounds back in those days, 30 rounds, 25
It's
rounds.
so crazy.
You know, I don't know what the record was, but you know, some of the fights were fights to the finish, that they would just fight until a guy couldn't go on. So maybe, I don't know how many that went, but it was scheduled for, like you said, 45. I'm not sure exactly how many went. Maybe Rob will verify it, but it might have went 15.
I think it went 50. I think he got the TKO in the 15th round. But just the fact that it was scheduled for 45 sounds crazy.
And listen, you go 15 rounds with the great Jack Johnson after being away 6 years. You know, it's not too bad.
Almost exactly 6 years he was off, almost to the day.
Yeah, I mean, there was also different rules back in those days, so we educate the people a little bit so they understand it, you know, in the proper way, that some of these guys, they might go 45 rounds, but every time somebody got dropped, the round would end.
Ah, gotcha.
So you know, it makes a little difference. So if you got dropped, you know, in, like, say, 20 seconds into the round, bang, the round's over, you go to the next round. And that's why back in those days, I'm not saying this is where the saying came from, but you had to bring your lunch, because you're going out there, you know, usually on a field somewhere where a ring was put and stands was, you know, in some cases were constructed. You go out there and all the people come out and see the fight. And these guys were something. They had to have the weigh-in before the fight sometimes and make the weight and then go out there and fight. And they go out there and they sometimes would bring, they only knew what they knew about nutrition back then, which was, you know, very little compared to what we know today. So they would bring maybe a box of oranges, a crate of oranges, you know, to give themselves sugar, to substance, energy, whatever. And they bring it out there to the field, to the ring. And this leads me into an opportunity to tell a great story. I think
I know where you're going with this. It's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, I might have told it before, but I think it's worth telling again. Listen, like all legendary stories, you don't know the exact accuracy of it, but I love the story, okay?
I do too.
I love the story, and I love the man that it's about. Again, it's about one of my favorites that people don't know this guy, the great Sam Langford. It's a shame. But, you know, you can learn about him now. You could Google him. You could look it up. And Rob will put something up. Wait till Rob puts up his record. You better be sitting. You better be sitting. He fought from lightweight to heavyweight. He fought close to 300 fights, whatever. And he was the great Sam Langford, okay? The great Sam Langford. And he was fighting a fighter, and, you know, a fighter who was a real good fighter. A lot of good fighters back then. And they were getting ready to go out to the ring after the weigh-in. And it was scheduled for 40 rounds, I think. You know, a mere 40. You know, it was a preliminary, short one. You know, it was a 40-rounder. And so they're going out, Ken, and they're walking out. And the other fighter sees, he's got a crate of oranges, you know. And he's going out there, and that's the other fighter has a crate of oranges. He looks at the great Sam Langford, who is already nervous because he's fighting Sam Langford anyway, you know. And he looks at him, and Sam's carrying in his hands. No crate. He's carrying in his hands 5 oranges. Just 5. So the fighter's nervous. He looks at Sam, the great Sam Langford, and he says, "You miscounted, Sam. You only got 5. Sam Langford looks at him and says, "Only gonna need 5."
It's the best.
He goes out there and knocks him out in 5 rounds. Again, I don't. Do I know for sure? All I know is it's enough for me. It's enough for me. Yeah, Sam Langford knocked out plenty of guys, over 100 knockouts in his career, I believe, and he was a great fighter. That it's almost a tragedy, to a certain extent. I know there's very important things in his life. I know. Nobody has to tell me. But it's almost a tragedy that more of our people don't know about people like Sam Langford. Their battles, their trials, their tribulations, what it took to become great, what they went through, who they were, how they became that, what they dealt with, what they had, what they didn't have. Sam Langford, ladies and gentlemen, the great Sam Langford.
And for those who may not know of Sam Langford, his record, just to give you some context, was 178 wins, 29 losses, 38 draws with 126 KOs from the fighting town of Weymouth, Nova Scotia, Canada. But all you need to know how tough he is he eventually ended up residing in Titletown, Boston, Massachusetts, and fought under the name of the Boston Bone Crusher.
There you go, Ken. You got it in. You're the man. You're the man. Touche. But he might have had more fights than that, because, like I said, back in those days, they used to have some places that didn't have decisions because the sport wasn't recognized. So they would go to newspaper decisions where, as I said, the newspaper writers the next day would put the winner, who they said was the winner, in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And those are not calculated into their records a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I'll be curious to hear the feedback from the fans on social media. I'm sure there'll be a lot of opinions here, and to be honest with you, we love hearing the opinions. We love a healthy back and forth and a healthy debate, which 99% of the people who comment on our stuff, it's all good-spirited, good-natured, fun.
We appreciate them.
Yeah, it really is. And to be honest, I look forward to reading the comments. Even when they disagree with us, it's interesting to listen to other people's perspectives and take everything into consideration. But this was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And hopefully everyone enjoys the content while we're in quarantine. I know that I get excited when I see new podcasts and new episodes from people that I respect and appreciate, and hopefully for a lot of people we're falling into that category. And but on behalf of everyone else, Teddy, I just want to say thanks again for all the time. Thanks for sharing all the knowledge and wisdom. I know I appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure the majority of our fans really appreciate it as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to the fans. I appreciate you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
We'll be back soon, hopefully with some live action. Take care.